Darren Keller had exactly $12 to his name when he crouched beside the sobbing child in the cereal aisle of Williams Market. The toddler's wails echoed off the shelves stacked high with sugary boxes, her cheeks flushed, fists balled, tears streaming in thick, frantic waves. People walked past, some glancing with annoyance, others with pity. But no one stopped, except Darren. He shifted his worn backpack off his shoulder and reached into the side pocket. "Hey," he said gently, crouching to the little girl's level. "You like dinosaurs?" The child hiccuped mid-sob, her big brown eyes locking onto his. Darren held up a small green plastic dinosaur. One of his daughter's old toys he always kept with him, just in case. "This one's name is Crunch," he said, holding it out like a peace offering. "He only roars when he's really happy. Want to hear?" The girl blinked at him, caught between curiosity and another cry. "Rare," Darren whispered dramatically, making the dinosaur do a little hop. The girl's lips twitched. "He says you're the bravest girl he's seen all day." She giggled just once and reached for the toy with a tiny, shaking hand. "There we go," Darren smiled, handing it over. "Crunch is all yours." "Valentina," a soft, breathless voice said behind him. He stood up slowly, turning to face the woman who had just rushed down the aisle. She was stunning in a way that didn't make sense for a grocery store. Black slacks, cream blouse, heels that didn't belong near a sticky linoleum floor. Her dark brown hair was swept into a low bun, and her eyes, bright, worried, and framed by long lashes, went straight to the toddler. "Are you okay?" she asked the girl, scooping her up. "I just turned for a second. She's all right," Darren said, rubbing the back of his neck awkwardly. "She dropped her snack and got scared, I think." The woman looked at Darren then, really looked. Her gaze flicked down to his scuffed boots, threadbare gray hoodie, the backpack slouched at his feet. "Thank you," she said, her voice quieter now. She doesn't usually cry like that. "No problem." He gave a small shrug, ready to walk away. "Wait," she said quickly. "I didn't catch your name." He hesitated. "Darren. My name's Darren." "I'm Celeste," she said, adjusting the now calm girl on her hip. "And this is Valentina." Celeste. The name floated in his chest longer than it should have. Valentina held up the plastic dinosaur to her mother. "Crunch." Celeste arched a brow, then smiled. "Crunch, huh? Well, thank you for saving us from public meltdown, Darren. Can I pay you for the toy?" No, it's nothing," he said, shaking his head. "I've got a daughter. She outgrew that one." "You sure?" she asked. Darren nodded. "Just glad she's okay." Celeste looked like she wanted to say more, but someone called her name from the other end of the aisle. A man in a sharp suit, holding a phone to his ear, waved her over. Her expression shifted instantly colder, guarded. "I have to go," she said. "But really, thank you." Darren watched her walk away, her heels clicking against the floor, her daughter now babbling happily about her new dino. He turned back to the shelf, grabbed the cheapest cereal box he could find, and headed toward the checkout. He didn't think he'd ever see her again. 3 days later, Darren stood outside the school daycare, waiting for his daughter, Violet, 5 years old, with a mop of dark curls and a voice louder than thunder in July. He'd just picked up a weekend shift at the auto shop to cover rent, and his feet ached. He leaned against the fence, eyes half closed. "Darren." He turned and blinked. There she was, Celeste, this time in jeans and a loose gray sweater, no heels, no bodyguard in sight. Valentina clung to her hand. "Hey," he said, surprised. "You stalking me?" Celeste laughed, and it was a warm, genuine sound that made something shift in his chest. "My niece goes here," she said quickly. "I wasn't expecting to run into you. You remembered my name. You calmed my child with a dinosaur. That's not the kind of thing you forget." Violet came running out then, arms wide. "Daddy." Darren caught her midair. "Hey, Peanut." Celeste looked between them, her smile softening. "She's beautiful. Looks just like you." "Thanks," Darren said, awkward again. "She's my whole world." Valentina tugged Celeste's hand. Crunch. Celeste crouched and pulled the toy from her bag. She hasn't put it down since. Darren looked at her, really looked. There was something about her that didn't fit the typical mold. She was polished, yes, but there was a sadness in her eyes. A kind of loneliness you didn't expect from someone so put together. "You want to grab a coffee?" he asked before he could stop himself. "There's a place down the street." Celeste hesitated for half a second. Then she nodded. Sure. The coffee shop was tiny, with sticky tables and a jukebox that hadn't worked in years. Violet and Valentina sat at a corner table with juice boxes and shared crackers while Darren and Celeste sat across from each other, 2 mugs between them. So, Darren said, what do you do? There was a beat of silence before she answered. I'm in finance. He raised a brow. Like spreadsheets and stuff? She laughed. Something like that. You own the company or something? She paused again. Darren smiled. I'm kidding. I'm a part-time mechanic and full-time snack provider. Celeste smiled down at her coffee. That sounds more important. It is, he said, then looked at her. You okay? She blinked. Why? You look like someone who hasn't had a real conversation in a while. Celeste stared at him, stunned. Then she whispered, yeah, I guess I am. He nodded. Me too. They sat in silence for a few moments, watching their girls giggle over crackers and toys. Then Celeste looked at him, really looked. You're not like anyone I've met before. Is that a good thing? He asked. I think it might be. He didn't know it yet, but that moment cheap coffee, sticky tables, and all was the beginning of something neither of them had expected. Not her, a billionaire with a guarded heart, and not him, a broke dad with nothing but hope in his pockets. But fate didn't care about bank accounts. It only cared about timing. And theirs had just begun. Do you always carry dinosaurs in your pocket, or was that a one-time rescue operation? Celeste set down her chai latte and leaned back on the cracked leather booth seat at the corner diner, an eyebrow raised in quiet challenge. Darren grinned, brushing a crumb from the corner of Violet's mouth as the girl munched on a grilled cheese beside him. I've got a rotating inventory of emergency toys. It's in the dad handbook right between How to Survive a Princess Tea Party and What to Do When Glitter Gets in Your Truck's Air Vents. Celeste chuckled, a soft sound that made him glance up. She wasn't wearing makeup this time, and he realized with a jolt that she looked more striking without it. Less polished, more real. Valentina leaned across the table and offered Violet a piece of crust. The gesture was clumsy, but Violet accepted it with a solemn nod, as if it were a sacred treaty between empires. The two girls had clicked fast, as if they'd known each other longer than a few hours. I was wondering, Celeste said, suddenly more serious. How do you manage everything alone? Darren hesitated, setting his coffee down. Trial and error. Mostly error. She tilted her head, waiting. My ex left 3 years ago. Said she wasn't cut out for the whole mom thing. I didn't blame her, not really. She was young. We both were. But Violet was already here, so that was that. And you've been raising her on your own since? Celeste's voice was quiet, but not pitying. Just curious. Yeah. My sister helps when she can, but she's got 3 kids of her own and a night job. So mostly, it's just me and Violet. We make a good team. Celeste watched him for a moment as if trying to fit that truth into the image she'd formed of him. Then her expression shifted, and she reached into her purse. Valentina made this yesterday, she said, pulling out a crumpled drawing. She insisted I bring it. Darren took the paper. It was a scribbled landscape, 2 stick figures, a dinosaur, and what looked like a playground. Violet's name was written in shaky letters beneath one figure. The other said me. He glanced up. She remembered her already. I think she needed a friend, Celeste said. So did I. The words hung there, heavier than they should have. Darren folded the paper and tucked it into his backpack without saying anything. A few minutes later, Celeste glanced at her watch and stood. I should get her home. Her bedtime's strict if she's not in bed by 8. She turns into a gremlin. Darren stood too, gathering Violet's things. Same here. Except my gremlin demands pancakes at midnight. They walked out together into the early evening light. The sky was streaked with pink and gold, the last warmth of the sun brushing their faces. Darren adjusted Violet's jacket as she climbed into his beat-up pickup, and when he turned, Celeste was watching him again. I'm hosting a fundraiser next week, she said abruptly. It's for a children's literacy program. I was going to go alone, but... Would you come with me? As my guest. He blinked. A fundraiser? There'll be food, she added, as if that might sweeten the pot. And music, and probably awkward small talk. I don't exactly own a tux. You won't need one, she said, though her eyes suggested otherwise. I've never been to something like that. Then it's time you tried, she said, her voice gentler this time. You helped me when you didn't have to. Let me return the favor. Darren hesitated. Every instinct told him this world. She spoke of fundraisers, catered dinners, expensive dresses wasn't his. But Violet tugged on his sleeve, just then, and whispered, "Can I wear my sparkly shoes?" He sighed. "All right, but only if I can bring a dinosaur for backup." Celeste smiled. "Deal." They parted ways in the parking lot, but Darren's mind didn't quiet for hours. He lay awake long after Violet had fallen asleep, staring at the ceiling of their small apartment, wondering what he'd just agreed to. 2 nights later, a box arrived at his door. It was wrapped in dark navy paper, no return address. Inside was a suit, black, tailored. With it, a simple note written in looping cursive, "For the fundraiser. You'll look great in it. Celeste." He'd never worn anything like it. The fabric felt like something out of a movie, smooth and weighty, not the kind of thing you could pick off a clearance rack. Violet squealed when he tried it on. "You look like a prince." He didn't feel like one, but he wore it anyway. The night of the fundraiser, he drove them in a borrowed sedan from his neighbor. His truck was too loud and too rusty for wherever they were going. The address Celeste had given him led to a glass-walled building downtown, lit up like something out of a dream. Valet attendants guided cars into a gated lot. He handed over the keys, holding Violet's hand tightly as they stepped inside. The first thing he noticed was the silence. Not from lack of sound, but from the hush of expensive things. The kind of quiet that came from wealth. The kind that made his spine stiffen. And then he saw her. Celeste stood near the staircase, a long sapphire gown flowing around her like water. Her hair was down, soft around her shoulders, and she wasn't wearing a single piece of jewelry she didn't need to. She was the centerpiece of the room without even trying. She saw him and walked over, ignoring the eyes that followed her path. "You clean up well," she said. "I feel like I'm about to get arrested for impersonating someone who belongs here." She smiled, then crouched to greet Violet. "You look beautiful." "I have sparkles," Violet announced proudly, lifting her shoes. Celeste looked up at Darren, her voice low. "You really came. I said I would. And that means something to you." "Everything," he said, surprising even himself. The fundraiser unfolded around them with glasses of champagne, live string music, and conversations Darren barely followed. People kept glancing at him, subtle but noticeable. He'd never been invisible before, but now he felt like a spotlight had been nailed to his chest. "Do they all know you?" he asked Celeste as they moved toward the buffet. "Most of them," she said. "This is my world. For better or worse. You're not just in finance, are you?" She hesitated. "No." He looked at her, really looked. "You own the company." Celeste didn't answer immediately. Then she said, "I own several." He exhaled, a humorless chuckle escaping. "Of course you do. Does it change anything?" "I don't know," he said honestly. "It might." Celeste stepped closer. "I didn't lie to you, Darren. I just didn't say everything. Because you didn't think I'd fit?" His voice was quiet. "Because I didn't want this to be about that." He stared at her, at the way her hand rested gently on Valentina's shoulder, the way her eyes softened each time they drifted to Violet. He wasn't sure what stunned him more, the truth of who she was, or the fact that it made him want to know her more, not less. "Then let's stop pretending," he said finally. "Tell me what I'm walking into." Celeste took a breath. And then, with careful precision, she began to peel back the layers of her life. And Darren realized he wasn't just falling for a woman far above his world, he was stepping into a life that would demand everything he thought he knew about love, pride, and what it meant to be a man. "You're mad," Celeste said flatly, her heels clicking across the marble floor as she led him away from the ballroom into a quieter hallway flanked by oil paintings and dim sconces. "I'm not mad," Darren replied, his voice calm but tight. "But you could have told me." "I didn't lie." "No, you just left out the part where you're one of the richest people in the city." She stopped walking and turned to face him. "Because I didn't want to watch your expression change like it just did." He looked at her, jaw set. "How did it change?" "You looked like you wanted to run." "I wanted to understand," he corrected. "Because I walked into this thinking you were someone I could maybe build something with. And now I'm trying to figure out if I was just a distraction from your reality." Celeste's breath caught. "You weren't. You aren't." "Then tell me what this is," Darren said, gesturing between them. "Because I'm standing in a room where I don't belong, wearing clothes I didn't buy, surrounded by people who look at me like I'm an accident that wandered in from the service entrance." "I invited you because I wanted you here," she said, her voice low now. Not as a prop. Not to prove something. Because I haven't stopped thinking about you since the market. Darren exhaled through his nose, eyes flicking away. You live in a world where everything's polished. Controlled. You don't just own companies, Celeste. You own rooms like this. I change tires for a living and fall asleep on a couch that's older than my kid. She stepped closer. And yet you're the only person who's looked me in the eye without needing something from me. He looked down at her, the edge in his expression softening just a notch. You think I don't know what it's like to feel out of place? She added. I've been surrounded by people my whole life and still felt like I was standing on glass. He didn't say anything. Not right away. Then, where's Valentina? With my sister for the night. I didn't want her here for this. He nodded slowly and leaned back against the wall, running a hand through his hair. I promised Violet ice cream after this. You can still have that, Celeste said. We can leave right now if you want. You'd walk out of your own fundraiser? I've walked out of worse for less. He studied her a moment longer. I don't want to be a footnote in your life. You're not, she said. You're the first page of something that doesn't feel manufactured. He looked at her for a long time, and then said, I'll take you up on the ice cream. But not because I'm ready to be swept into whatever this is. Because Violet's probably about to riot in the coat room. Celeste allowed herself the smallest smile. Fair warning, I don't do sprinkles. He arched a brow. Now that's just un-American. They returned to the ballroom just long enough for Celeste to hand off her responsibilities to a startled assistant. And when they stepped out into the cool night air, Darren noticed something that hadn't registered before. She looked lighter. Less composed. As if the formality had been a costume she was finally allowed to shed. The sedan was still parked out front. Thanks to a generous tip, Darren hadn't realized she'd slipped the valet earlier. Violet sat in the back seat with a coloring book, munching crackers and humming to herself. Hey, Peanut, Darren said, climbing into the driver's seat. Guess what? Ice cream, she chirped. You're psychic. They drove to a small shop nestled between a laundromat and a pharmacy. Nothing fancy. Just linoleum floors and a rotating case that squeaked when turned. Celeste sat beside Violet in a red vinyl booth, spooning strawberry ice cream, while Darren leaned back and watched them both. You know, he said finally, you're not what I expected. Celeste looked up. What did you expect? Cold. Detached. Someone who keeps people at arm's length because it's easier than being disappointed. She considered that. That's not completely wrong. But that's not who you are with her. He nodded toward Valentina's drawing, which Violet had now claimed as her own. Or with Violet. Maybe I was tired of pretending, she said. And maybe you're the first person I've met who doesn't care what I have, only who I am. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. You said you didn't want to be alone in your world anymore. But I'm not going to be the guy you pull into it just because I don't ask for anything. Celeste's expression shifted just slightly. Then what would you ask for? Honesty, he said, and the chance to figure this out without being steamrolled by your spotlight. I can do that. And no more surprise tuxes. She gave a quiet laugh. All right. But you look good in it. Their eyes held for a beat too long, and Darren felt something settle in his chest. Not certainty, but a beginning. The kind that didn't come with music or perfect timing, but with quiet understanding. They finished their ice cream, and when Celeste helped Violet into her jacket, Darren noticed the way her hand lingered protectively at the girl's shoulder. Not out of obligation. Out of something else entirely. Back in the car, Violet fell asleep against the window, her breath fogging the glass. The city skyline blurred past them, lights flickering like distant stars. Celeste broke the silence. There's a property just outside the city. I go there when I need to think. It's quiet. Just pine trees and sky. He glanced at her. Sounds like a reset button. It is, she said. I'd like to take you there. Why? Because I don't want this to be just dinners and polite conversation. I want you to see where I go when I stop pretending. Darren considered that. You sure you want to open that door? I think I opened it the moment you handed my daughter a plastic dinosaur. He didn't answer, but he didn't say no. They pulled up to his apartment complex, where the porch light flickered weakly above the cracked steps. Celeste looked at the building without comment. I'll walk you up, she offered. You don't have to. I want to. He carried Violet in his arms. She stirred once, mumbled something about sprinkles, then went limp again. Celeste followed quietly, her heels clicking softly against the concrete. Inside, The apartment was small, just a living room with a fold-out couch, a kitchenette, and 2 bedrooms barely big enough for twin beds. He laid Violet down, pulled a blanket over her, and returned to find Celeste standing near the bookshelf. She ran her fingers over the spines, most of them paperbacks, creased and dog-eared. "You read?" she asked. "When I can." She picked one up, stared at the title, then set it down. "This place feels lived in." "It is." Celeste turned to him. "So am I." He crossed the room slowly, stopping in front of her. "Then maybe we're not as different as we thought." She didn't kiss him. Not yet. But she reached up and touched his face, her palm warm against the line of his jaw. "I'll call you tomorrow," she said. "I'll answer." She left without another word, her footsteps fading down the hallway. And as Darren stood there alone, something unfamiliar bloomed in his chest. Not fear. Hope. Darren stepped out of the truck, the crunch of gravel beneath his boots loud in the stillness of the countryside. Pines rose tall and quiet around them, stretching into a pale morning sky. The air smelled like rain-soaked earth and moss. He glanced over his shoulder at the cabin nestled between the trees, sleek and modern, but softened by its cedar siding and wraparound porch. Celeste stood at the front steps, watching him with a quiet steadiness he hadn't seen before. Violet and Valentina were already inside, distracted by a stack of puzzles and a basket of books that Celeste's housekeeper had stocked. The woman, a kind-eyed local named June, had greeted them at the gate and promised to keep a watchful eye on the girls while Darren and Celeste took a walk. "You built this place?" Darren asked, stepping up beside her. "I designed it," she replied. "The builders handled the rest." He nodded, letting his gaze sweep over the open landscape. "It doesn't feel like the city." "That's the point." They walked in silence for a while, following a path that led down toward a clearing with a view of the lake. The surface shimmered silver blue beneath the clouds, framed by reeds and a pair of overturned rowboats. Celeste paused near the edge and folded her arms against the breeze. "This is where I come when I don't want to be anyone but myself," she said quietly. Darren stepped closer, his hands in his jacket pockets. "And who is that?" She hesitated. "Someone who spent her entire life trying to be enough. For a boardroom, for investors, for headlines, but never for herself." He looked at her. "You're enough right now." She didn't speak for a moment. Then she sat on the edge of the dock, her heels kicked off beside her, her bare toes dipping just above the water. "I was engaged once," she said, not looking at him. "Years ago. It was arranged. Not officially, but the kind of thing where 2 powerful families shake hands and expect you to smile through it." Darren joined her, sitting a few feet away. "Did you love him?" "No," she said. "But I tried to convince myself I could. He was smart, polished, and he knew how to play the part. Until he didn't. What happened? He sold inside information from one of my companies. Nearly ruined half the foundation I'd built. I covered it up quietly, ended the engagement, and moved on. Or pretended to." Darren's jaw flexed, but he said nothing. "I told myself I'd never let anyone get close again," she added. "Not unless I was sure they wanted me, not the empire." He studied her profile, the way the wind caught strands of her hair. "I'm not here for your empire." "I know," she said. "That's why I'm scared." He leaned back on his hands, staring out at the water. "You think I'm not?" She turned to him then. "What are you scared of?" "That I'll never be enough for someone like you. That I'll let myself believe in something that's always been out of reach." She reached for his hand, lacing her fingers with his. "You calmed my child without hesitation. You've raised your daughter with more grace than most men raise their voices. You didn't flinch when I brought you into a world that doesn't make space for people like you. If that's not enough, then nothing is." Darren looked down at their joined hands, weathered fingers and manicured nails, 2 lives with nothing in common except the space between their palms. "Do you want this?" he asked. "I want all of it," she said. "But only if you do too." He didn't answer with words. Instead, he leaned in and kissed her slow, certain, and with the kind of restraint that spoke louder than hunger. When they pulled apart, her forehead rested against his, and neither of them moved for a long time. Later that evening, after dinner and bedtime stories, they sat curled on the porch swing while the girls slept inside. A storm rolled in, soft and distant, thunder rumbling like a lullaby across the trees. "I've been thinking," Celeste said. "That's dangerous." She nudged him with her foot. "I want to start something new. A program. For single parents. Childcare, job training, housing support. Something real. He looked at her. Because of me? Because of what I see when I look at you. And because I want to use what I have to build something that lasts. You showed me what real strength looks like. I want to amplify that. Darren didn't speak right away. Then he said, "You'll need someone who understands what it's like on the ground. I was hoping you'd help me build it." He turned toward her fully. "You sure?" "Yes. I want a partner who sees what I miss." He folded his arms. "You're not doing this to prove a point, are you?" "No," she said firmly. "I'm doing it because I finally want to be part of something that matters. And because I believe in you." The swing creaked gently beneath them, and the rain began to fall, soft and steady. "I never thought I'd have this," Darren murmured. "Have what?" "Peace. A future. Someone who doesn't want to fix me or save me. Just walk beside me." Celeste turned toward him, her hand settling over his heart. "Then let's walk together." A week later, they held the first planning meeting for the foundation in the community center where Violet took her art classes. Darren wore his best shirt, sleeves rolled, and Celeste sat beside him in jeans and a soft cardigan. No assistants, no paperwork. Just two people with a vision. Volunteers signed up. Donations came in. And through it all, they stood side by side not as a billionaire and a mechanic, not as a charity case and a benefactor, but as equals. 3 months later, Darren proposed on a dock at the cabin, just as the sun dipped behind the trees. Violet and Valentina tossed flower petals into the lake, while Celeste said yes, barefoot and laughing, tears on her cheeks. They married in a field behind the cabin, under a canopy of lights and pine boughs. There were no headlines, no press, just family. Violet walked down the aisle, throwing more petals than necessary. Valentina clung to her hand, grinning with all her baby teeth showing. Celeste wore a simple ivory dress, and Darren wore the same suit she'd sent him months before, now tailored to perfection. When the officiant asked if they would love each other through every storm, Darren answered with a voice steady as stone. "I already have." Celeste smiled, radiant and real. "And I will." Their kiss was quiet and long, a promise sealed beneath the trees. And when they danced under the stars that night, barefoot in the grass, the only thing louder than the music was the sound of two lives finally, perfectly, becoming one. Darren adjusted his collar in the mirror, his fingers slightly trembling as he fumbled with the last button. He wasn't nervous, not in the usual way, but something about this day carried a weight he hadn't felt before. Not even when he'd knelt on the dock 3 months ago, ring in his pocket, heart pounding like a war drum. "You keep fussing with that shirt, it's going to unravel," Celeste said from behind, her voice wrapped in quiet affection. She leaned against the doorframe, barefoot, her hair still wet from the morning shower. The sun was barely up, casting a soft gold light across the bedroom of the cabin they now considered a second home. Darren turned around, his gaze settling on her. "I'm trying not to sweat through it before noon." "You're not the one giving the keynote," she teased, walking toward him. She reached up and flattened the collar with a practiced hand. "Besides, you've stood in front of harder crowds than this." "Yeah, but none of them were CEOs who own private islands and vote with hedge funds." Celeste tilted her head. "You once told off a judge at Violet's school board meeting because she wanted to cut the music program. I think you'll survive this." He exhaled slowly. "This is different." "It is," she agreed. "But it's ours." Downstairs, June was already preparing breakfast for the girls, who were playing a quiet game of cards on the porch. The morning was peaceful, but the day ahead was anything but. This was the launch event for the foundation, the one they'd built from scratch together. The one that had grown faster than either of them expected. What started as a small idea had attracted attention from people with deep pockets and louder voices. But at its core, it was still about the families Darren had fought to protect all his life. He pulled on his jacket and turned to her. "You're sure about this?" "I've never been more sure about anything," she said. "You're the reason it exists. You're the one who gave it a heartbeat." He gave a quiet nod, then kissed her forehead. "Then let's give it a voice." The event was held in a repurposed warehouse on the edge of the city, transformed into a luminous space with white lights strung across exposed beams and rows of chairs arranged around a low stage. The walls were covered in hanging photographs, portraits of single parents and their children, captured in everyday moments, smiling, surviving, thriving. Violet and Valentina sat in the front row beside June and Celeste's sister, coloring quietly and whispering to each other every few minutes. Darren stood behind the curtain, adjusting the mic clipped to his lapel while Celeste spoke to someone from the mayor's office. "Are these nerves or just adrenaline?" she asked, walking over once the official stepped away. "Bit of both," he admitted. "I haven't stood in front of a crowd since I accidentally became Santa at that holiday event last year. And everyone loved you," she said. "Just speak from your gut." He glanced at her, then leaned down to whisper, "What if my gut says to run? Then I'll tackle you in heels," she replied, her eyes dancing. "Now go. They're waiting." He stepped onto the stage, blinking slightly under the lights. The room fell quiet. A few cameras clicked. People leaned forward in their seats. He cleared his throat. "My name's Darren Keller. I'm not a politician. I'm not a philanthropist. I'm a dad." There was a low chuckle of appreciation, and he continued, "I used to think love was something you had to earn through perfection. That if you worked hard enough, stayed out of trouble, protected what mattered, you'd be worthy of it. But life doesn't work that way. It throws you curveballs. People leave. Money runs out. Doors shut." He paused, eyes scanning the crowd, then landed on Celeste, standing offstage, watching him with an expression that said she saw all of him and loved him anyway. And then one day, someone hands your kid a dinosaur in a grocery store aisle, and everything changes. The audience laughed gently, not knowing the full story, but sensing the truth behind his words. This foundation isn't about handouts. It's about rebuilding dignity. It's about giving people the tools to stand back up and say, "I'm still here. I still matter. And I'm proud to build that with the woman who showed me what real partnership looks like." He stepped back, the applause rolling through the room like a wave. Celeste met him halfway as he walked off stage, her arms slipping around his waist. "You were perfect," she whispered. "Guess I didn't need the dinosaur after all." They sat together through the rest of the event, meeting donors, listening to testimonials from families already enrolled in the pilot program. By the end of the evening, over 100 new applicants had signed up. The foundation was officially live. That night, back at the cabin, they sat on the porch swing, wrapped in a wool blanket, the girls fast asleep inside. A soft breeze drifted through the pines, and the stars were bright, unbothered by city lights. "You know," Celeste said, her head on his shoulder. "Not long ago, I thought happiness was something you had to protect, keep in a box, guard from anyone who might want a piece of it. And now I know it's something you share. Or it isn't real." Darren kissed her temple. "I used to think I had to carry everything alone. That asking for help made me weak. You're the strongest man I know." He looked down at her, his hand resting over hers. "You're the reason I stopped surviving and started living." She smiled, eyes soft. "We did that for each other." They fell into a comfortable silence, the kind that only comes when nothing is left unsaid. Their hands stayed clasped, fingers interlaced, grounded by the life they'd built from shattered pieces and unexpected beginnings. A few weeks later, they took the girls to the coast. A quiet beach house tucked into the dunes became their summer escape. Violet collected shells, while Valentina built crooked sandcastles. Darren grilled barefoot, and Celeste read aloud from the porch swing, her voice carrying over the wind. One evening, Darren came up behind her while she stood at the edge of the shore, the waves tugging at her ankles. He wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "This is it," he said. "What is?" "The life I didn't think I'd ever have." Celeste leaned into him. "You have it now." They stood there until the stars came out. Two souls who had no reason to find each other, and every reason never to let go. And they never did.